So perfect.
All righty.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to our conversation where we'll be kicking off our 25th anniversary. To kick our fireside chat conversation kicked off, I'm excited to welcome our board president, Matt Phillips, to introduce Latonya Fourte Lyles. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you everyone for joining us. So as Jeremy stated, we are kicking off our 25th anniversary as the LGBT Chamber of Commerce of Illinois, and we're thrilled that you're here to join in for a whole year of celebration for this milestone that we're reaching. Tonight's chat is going to give us an opportunity to have a nice look back at the very early days of the chamber, thanks to our founder, Tracy Baim, who so graciously agreed to join us today for this discussion. Be sure to stick around with us for our next event, which is, our next Mix and Mingle, which is on March 9th. So it'll be the second Tuesday in March. And that is when I get the distinct pleasure of introducing our new board members and our new vice president for the board. So we look forward to seeing you there. Continue to support us and continue to attend our events throughout this 25th anniversary year. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my very capable colleague, Secretary of the LGBT Chamber Board, Latonya Fourte Lyles.
Thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited because we have a wonderful fireside chat planned for you guys. And we're here to talk to the founder of the Illinois LGBT Chamber, Tracy Baim. She is a wonderful individual. I've had the opportunity to meet her several times, and I've had the opportunity to engage. And so I love history. So this conversation is about history. This is about history of the chamber, how the chamber got started, and what the steps were to advocate for the LGBT plus community. So without further ado, I'm going to call Tracy to the stage so that we can go ahead and get started. All righty? Hi, Tracy.
Hi.
So let's start off. First, I want to ask, what pronouns do you use?
She, her would be
all righty.
fine.
Thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. So I mentioned that I really love history. And I really like understanding how organizations, the impetus of how they got started and where the direction came from and where the thought process came from. So tonight we're gonna really have a conversation about that history and how your thought processes surrounding the chamber and how you got started with that level of advocacy. So I wanna talk about your journey first. So tell me about the start of your journey in advocating for the LGBT plus community.
Well, I definitely came at it from a journalism angle. I graduated with a journalism degree in 1984 from Drake University. I moved back to my hometown of Chicago and confronted the reality of homophobia in journalism immediately. I had two guides in that. My stepfather worked at the Tribune. My mother at the time worked at the Chicago Defender. And both of them said that, you know, you're probably gonna have to make your own path because you're not gonna make it, especially at the Chicago Tribune. So what I found out was there was a gay newspaper at the time called Gay Life Newspaper. And the owner was Chuck Renslow. He was probably the most serial entrepreneur in our community's ever history. I think he had almost 30 businesses over the course of his career, and he started International Mr. Leather. At the time, Gay Life was located right next door to Man's Country Bathhouse. He also owned a leather bar. He was pretty incredible businessman. And so I started working at Gay Life, and then I was a co-founder of Windy City Times in 1985 and left to start my own paper, Outlines, in 1987. And I was really very much a business owner by default. I did the business side of the journalism world in order to do the journalism side. And I have been by default a business owner ever since. I don't even necessarily have considered myself a business owner because I'm not that great at the business side. But to me, the power of controlling your own destiny, which is what entrepreneurs hunger for, at least in my world, was how I kind of got into the business side. And, you know, just to pivot into the chamber's history, at the time in the 1980s, there was an organization called the Metropolitan Business Association. And it was the first gay business association in Chicago that wasn't specifically about bars. So there was the Tavern Guild in the 1970s, which was a gay bar association. They especially were lobbying against extra taxes and typical policy issues related to the bars and against harassment of the bars by police and the mafia. But Metropolitan Business Association broadened and was more for especially a lot of lawyers and travel agents that were openly LGBT owned and advocating for their community. So it was one of the early associations that I covered in the community. So I was inspired for sure in the business side in the 1980s when I first started.
So I think you don't give yourself enough credit. You mentioned that you don't necessarily consider yourself, entrepreneurial, but this is no undertask. You did a monumental thing in starting an entire chamber dedicated to a specific population. That's no easy task. So, yeah.
I was going to say, I was very much inspired by the work of the Metropolitan Business Association and also the Cream City Foundation Association in Milwaukee. I think they might have been the very first in the country. And what was interesting, when I was looking to do the Chamber of Commerce, I held some focus groups, which I typically just jump off a cliff when I think of an idea. But in this particular case, I did not. And I held a bunch of focus groups at my newspaper office to ask people what they might see in an organization that served the business community. And there were definitely some very specific interests. And one of them was large scale events coming to Chicago, because while we had some homegrown events like International Mr. Lather, Miss Continental, and some softball tournaments, there were also a lot of other organizations that were starting to have national events. And there was the Gay Games. And so one of the things that we talked about in the mid-90s, that wouldn't it be great for Chicago to bid for some of these really large events like the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force and the Gay Games. So that is ultimately what I then got involved in after launching the chamber. A few of us got involved in the Gay Games stuff, but it was very intentional for us to name it a Chamber of Commerce. And as far as I know, we were the first LGBT organization to claim being a Chamber of Commerce. Many were acting in that way, but nobody thought really that they could use that name. I think in everybody's mindset, it was just like, well, you have to be, some corporate people. There's like an ownership of that phrase psychologically. Like none of us really had occurred to us that we could just claim that phrase. So we did. We just said, we're a Chamber of Commerce. That's really what we want to be. We want to work with neighborhood chambers of commerce, like in Andersonville and Boys Town and such. But this is to be for the broader area. And from the very start, we were suburban and city. So I'm really glad the name eventually has changed to what it is today, because back in 96, gay and lesbian was the predominant way the community was referred to, but that became pretty passé within a few years. So I'm really glad the name's been changed, and also the geographic footprint has changed to follow the pattern of the community.
Wow, that's, you just roll the history right off your tongue. And it's just like you're given all the starts, and you talked about something that's going to connect to my next question, and it's the iterations. The LGBT Chamber of Commerce of Illinois has gone through several iterations since you founded the organization. However, we want to learn a little bit more about the start of the chamber. Who you talked to, how you connected the dots to say, this is what we need to do and how we need to do it.
So I was approached in 1995 by Art Johnston of Sidetrack Bar and Carrie Barnett, who at the time owned one of the LGBT bookstores, People Like Us Books. People Like Us Books was located below my newspaper Outlines and a building on Belmont. And then Sidetrack, of course, over on Halsted. And they approached me about doing a map with them for the Democratic National Convention that was coming to Chicago the next year. They said, wouldn't it be great to have a map of LGBT or businesses for the Democratic National Convention delegates to support, right? So it was a real simple concept. And I had already been percolating the idea of doing something to replace the Metropolitan Business Association, which had folded. A lot of the 70s organizations didn't make it into the 1990s, in part because a lot of the diversion of energy and money that was necessary for the HIV/AIDS movement, like our community center folded, a lot of things, the person power and the resources, and very rightfully were going to HIV AIDS. So MBA had closed. And so my feeling was that I could use that opportunity to do a map to start the chamber. So that's what we did. And I recruited a fourth person, Kevin Boyer. He had been chairperson of Gerberhardt Library in the 90s and was very instrumental in starting the National Gay and Lesbian History Month with GLSEN at the time, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. So I knew he was a great doer. Like, you need a doer, right? And he was great at press releases. He was great at just, doing stuff. So the four of us worked on the map together, but Kevin and I then became the first co-chairs of the chamber because he and I were willing to and able to put in the time necessary to do the work. And then we grew it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Then he and I also then got involved in the gay games as well. So the map did come out in time for the Democratic National Convention. We, put it out at all the gay businesses and promoted it in the gay press. And the DNC that year was very successful in Chicago. There were lots of LGBT events that were held as well. Human Rights Campaign and other organizations were really coming into their own at the time.
Wow.
Do you guys hear that squeaky toy that my sister's dog is? Okay, I'm gonna just step out for 1 second and shut another door.
Yeah. No problem, Tracy. I was so busy paying attention to what you were saying because, again, I am a history buff and I love to hear how organizations start and just the thought process and being a person who is also an individual that advocates for populations that are underserved. This is just amazing information. It's amazing work and it's amazing background. So thank you for that.
It's enough history. I have a little bit of a souvenir. I hope it shows okay. It's going to be opposite, but we did this Pride Dollars card in the late 90s. It was like you would take it to businesses and get a discount at businesses. So I found this because I'm packing to move and I found some chamber stuff. So this was kind of a cute little pocket thing that people carried around back in the late 90s. Pride Dollars card.
Uh-oh. We maybe need to bring back a 25th anniversary card, pocket card. So I actually want to take the last two questions that I asked you and connect the dots. So you told us a lot about your background and you told us about how the chamber got started. Connect this community mission, connect the dots between your history and background and how the chamber got started as far as when you went to develop this mission.
It's interesting. I would not be necessarily a typical person that would start a business organization because I'm very much a grassroots kind of person. But this was before Human Rights Campaign had their corporate equality index. This was before a lot of pride organizations started, ERGs started at corporate America. I could very much see that the corporate world could have a dramatic impact on the LGBT community in two ways. One is on the consumer front, meaning you could see the advocacy of people like Jesse Jackson and others who were advocating for the Black dollar, right? Saying that there needs to be more just ways that marketing and corporate America treats the African-American community. And then I also could see that obviously the vast majority of LGBTQ people were not going to be starting up their own business, but needed to live their true lives within a corporate world. So that changing corporations could be part of the advocacy that a small chamber of commerce could do. So we actually sent out a survey to corporate America. And I even flew to New York to meet with the head of diversity of IBM to talk to them about, we had like a 12-point plan on how your corporation needs to check these boxes in order to qualify to be a member of our chamber and also to be kind of rated by our chamber. So we did that before HRC did. And a lot of the corporations were very hungry to be seen as pro-LGBTQ, but they didn't do the things like include health insurance that was for partners and all sorts of things that we know today are the benchmark for the HRC index. Well, those things weren't really on the table back then. We mostly focused on the Chicago area, but when there was a strong corporate headquarters elsewhere, and we knew there were employees based in Chicago, we also tried to advocate for change. And IBM was one on the forefront of being a great LGBT workplace. So we would advocate at the corporate level. But what was interesting is we made sure that, and I'm sorry for the people from corporations on the call, but we didn't allow them to be board members. They could only be members, auxiliary members. They weren't voting members, and they couldn't be on the board, because my biggest concern was that they would take over the organization in its infancy and influence what its mission was. And tends to be that someone that works at a bank they get points for doing chambers of commerce. So they have the time, where small businesses, it's a sacrifice for them to do the labor of starting and running an organization. So we were very clear that we didn't want our mission to be distorted. Now it's a much stronger organization, and now it makes total sense to have that integration. But we were very much discriminating against the corporations early on, because it could have become a very different organization and not played to the mission of LGBT entrepreneurs.
Well, sometimes it's important to stay true to what your mission is. And sometimes in order to get to that next growth level, it requires, to pull back a little. Sometimes we want to go all in, and it's just not where you need to be at the time.
Right.
One thing that you mentioned, which really stuck out to me, you talked about Jesse Jackson and looking at the Black dollar. When you get down to advocacy for any group, underserved group, it gets down to the way I always look at it as economic impact. And that economic impact is about the multiplier effect. And that multiplier effect is taking that dollar, and how many times does that dollar circulate in a community? And in order to really increase the opportunities and the advocacy for those groups, you want to have that dollar circulate in the community as many times as necessary in order for it to really support that community. So that leads me to a question in talking about challenges, because we talked about money, economics, multiplier effect. So when running a chamber, specifically a business chamber, talk to me about some of the challenges that you had in those early days when you're trying to develop a chamber that's specifically advocating for LGBTQ plus businesses.
I will. I'll do a side story about gay dollars, though. I don't know how many people on the call, because a lot of folks are younger on this call, but in the mid-1980s, Frank Kellis, who owned the Gold Coast Leather Bar, and Marge Summit, who owned His and Hers Bar, started a campaign called the Gay Dollars Campaign. And they issued stamps that said gay and then a dollar symbol. And bars and gay businesses would stamp their money with this next to the face on the dollar bill or $5 bill or $20 bill. Well, the government didn't like this whatsoever. It was meant to be a clout effort, because a business at the corner of Broadway and Belmont, it was a small grocery store. They wouldn't take gay. I mean, they were like, whenever a gay person an obvious gay person, let's put it that way, came in to spend their money, they were wearing gloves. I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
And so this campaign started out of an anger to show how important our money was. And then it was a litmus test for banks like small banks and others that wouldn't take the dollars from these businesses. So said, we're going to go to another bank. So it was the start of some real aggressive push by our community, and it was internationally covered. Marge was interviewed. And then, of course, the federal government interviewed them and were threatening them because they were defacing the dollars. So they were saying they were doing it in the same place that banks write in there when they're doing counts and stuff. So it lasted many months. It was at its peak. And then it kind of went away. But in terms of money for the early chamber, the thing was, it was all volunteer run for a few years. And years don't mean anything to me right now. It's hard to remember. But when we started in '96, Kevin and I were co-chairs and basically, unpaid staff for its first 3 or 4 years. And we had a really great board that was also very active, that ran meetings and did all the work. So we didn't really have hardly any costs. We did some co-op advertising, especially in national publications like The Advocate, for businesses that were more tourism oriented. So we might filter through money, but we didn't have a big budget. At some point, we were able to get a Chicago block grant for a staff person. So that's when the chamber pretty much has had a staff person ever since. They had a few down years in there because there was some, hiring of a board member to run the organization. And then it kind of had some issues with the federal government, with taxes and not paying its employment taxes. There were some bad years there after I left, but we left it with about $50,000 in the black. And like within a year, people came in and it was 50,000 in the red. And so some people came in later, thankfully, including a woman named Christy Snell, who came in and saved it. They renegotiated all their debts, and they were able to come out of it, thankfully. It was very painful to watch. And, you can't, when you're a founder and you leave, it's very hard, and I don't even recommend it, that you come in and try to save it again. Like, it needed to either survive on its own with new leadership, or it needed to close. And, luckily it didn't close.
Right.
And now I'm grateful to be part of it and active. I love what Mr. Holston is doing. I think that this chamber now is really visioning a lot of what we wanted 25 years ago. It is doing today.
That's something that you mentioned that's really, really important. And that is understanding when you're running in an organization, the challenges are going to come. And being able to weather that storm is so important. So I am very thankful as a member of the chamber that it's certainly survived. I'm, love to advocate and ally for LGBTQ businesses. So this is, I'm definitely happy and ecstatic that the chamber has survived. So I want to talk about you've mentioned some people, but I want to learn more about your partners in crime during those days. Because I know a lot of times when you're trying to start up something, it's very, very nitty gritty, and you've got people, everybody's all hands in, there's no job too big or too small. So talk about some of your partners in crime during those days.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin was just an amazing co-chair to be with. And we had a treasurer named Terry Childers. He lives with his husband now in Costa Rica. They've been there for about 20 years. But he was a very important kind of person we could rely on to really keep the books. And they ran a small real estate rental and ownership business in Lakeview. So he was really terrific, and as is his husband, Pete Thalen. And then we had, the board itself it did rotate in and out. There was a woman named Barb Kay who had a inspection business in the city, and environmental inspection. And so she was really important. My partner, Jean, would staff a lot of the events. We had some folks in the suburbs, one woman, a therapist named Mary Lewis, who helped us with the suburban chapter. And they would have almost monthly meetings out in the far suburbs, Aurora and St. Charles. So those are a few of the people. There's definitely a lot more. Some of the early events that I really loved doing, we had this annual event for maybe 3 or 4 years, I can't remember, that was honoring longtime LGBT business owners. So the first year we did it was the most fun and the biggest because it had never been done before, right? So there were all these 40-year businesses, 30-year businesses, that we could honor. And it was so great having them all. It was at Paris Dance on Montrose, which is a wonderful lesbian bar up there. And we were able to honor these incredible icons of business. And they were openly gay lawyers like Renee Hanover, and many of the bar owners and such that came, like Lost and Found's owner, Ava Allen came. And so those were some of my favorite events, because these were the true pioneers in the business world that did it way, before Stonewall, like Jim Flint, right? I mean, he was, bartending at these gay bars and getting raided. I think he was arrested over 40 times. These were people that really sacrificed to make the work that I did and other people possible.
Wow. It just, when you talk about some of these things, and, even when mentioning some of the things that were happening with regard to, the gay dollars and grocery stores, not, it's just hard to think that those kind of things were happening. You know, sometimes you look and you say, okay, how much of things have changed, you know, because it's kind of a 2-step forward, 1-step back motion, and there's still
you a cake? Yeah, can I bake you a cake? Right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, which is insane. But you know, so it's you know, those challenges, especially when you're talking about business and commerce, when it shouldn't matter, because at the end of the day, the only money that I know that spends is green. And it doesn't matter whose hand it passes from, it's still green. And so that's always a challenge. And I know we talked a little bit about money before, but I want to go back to some of the money, because we know that when you undertake ventures, like starting up a chamber, normally if you look at some other chambers, they're typically started with the businesses that's building the organization, and a lot of times there is that corporate aspect to it. Tell us about money. I mean, you were, I know at one time 50,000 in the black, and then you went in the red. But tell us how you funded the organization in those earlier days.
Well, before we got that first block grant, it really was membership dues, and we had close to 500 members. In my recollection, it might have been 400, but it was over 400 at one point. City and suburbs, a lot of service-based businesses, and then we charged the corporations more for their membership, and we got a few of those. And we did some events where people would pay, if you remember, you know, but it was very low to the ground. We didn't get over our skis, as they say. We were very conservative. The good thing was I ran a newspaper, so I could run free ads, and this is when there wasn't an internet. So this is how people found out about things, was the newspaper. So I could run free ads as much as I wanted in Outlines and Nightlines newspaper. So we were able to really promote it for free. Kevin was a great press release writer. We got a lot of coverage because it was so unique. We got local, you know, Crane Chicago Business covered us. The other mainstream media covered us. So we didn't lack from visibility. Leanne Trotter, she wasn't at Channel 5 then, but she was at another network. She did a great story on the work. And then we did start to, you know, advocate big and beyond. So the Gay Games was an effort that the chamber, because of Kevin and I, were extremely involved in, because we knew it had this great impact on the city. And ultimately the city gave a tourism grant to the Gay Games to help promote Chicago's business community around the world. So it was, the way we did it was very organic, and we didn't try to force something. And we focused a lot on very small businesses and what do they need. So we got the SBA in to give speeches on how to get loans. We did a lot of just very low to the ground stuff, so we didn't overspend.
So I'm looking at your beautiful flag behind you. Yep. And it just reminded me of a question that I wanted to definitely address is intersectionality. So when you're talking about the LGBTQ community, just as any community, you have a range of background experiences, you know, coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds, et cetera. So when looking at things from the perspective of intersectionality, the LGBTQ community extends across all of these: culture, ethnicity, race, socioeconomics. So tell me about how the chamber partners, specifically in those days, to increase engagement from different communities.
So, you know, one of the things that we were very aware of was the stereotype about the gay community, that it was all wealthy, white, and male and young. That was a lot of the imaging and advertising, and it was how, in many ways, the gay community promoted itself, because it wanted to go after dollars, right? And so, as someone who's more grassroots activist, I was very clear early on that we can't present that stereotype to the outside world that we're all, you know, rich, right? That this would, it's not only true, it's also damaging to the work that we need to do. So we did partner with, nonprofits that were diverse and tried to really encourage a diverse membership base. But openly gay and being a business owner were pretty rare during the window of time we were starting. So the barriers of people that were also based on race and class and gender and access and especially transgender in very early stages of acceptance were much more challenging than they are today. So I think the work the Chamber is doing today is phenomenal in doing, I've been to several of the Black History Month business panels and met business owners I didn't know. So I think reaching across to other kinds of chambers of commerce and also being an advocate for the consumers of our community to support diverse businesses. So we did a lot of advocacy in the early years of the dollars, like the Pride Dollars was one of those advocacy efforts that went to the consumers directly as a chamber and said, support these LGBT-owned businesses. And I think that there could be some advocacy across multiple chambers of commerce in Chicago to do that, to not only get government contracts, but also to support each other through the consumer side of our communities. Supporting African-American owned restaurants, for example, would be a great campaign to do, because many LGBT-owned businesses, they're not going to necessarily join a chamber. Most businesses don't, join advocacy chambers, but we can serve them anyway by advocating for people supporting businesses from different types of communities. So I think to be a good ally is to acknowledge the fact that different communities have different barriers to being out, and also just time. Small businesses, time is obviously our most valuable asset, and we can't expect people to be able to reach this way. It has to be a two-way street, and sometimes that street first has to go the other way. So I think there is a lot of work that can be done. Chicago is obviously a phenomenal business community, a small business community, and maybe work with the mayor's office and others could help bridge those divides.
Agreed. Government has to be a part of the solution. I know often we talk about, oh no, we don't want government in it, but government definitely, especially when you're talking about business strategies, sometimes the government can lead the charge, and it can be the pressure to corporations to do more and to do better. Yeah. So which leads me to allies. What do you think in those days, what do you think you needed from your allies when you were starting that chamber?
Definitely there was just a kind of the very first openly gay elected officials were coming into power, and it was mainly judges back then. But Larry McKeon had been elected to the state legislature as the first openly gay person in our state legislature. So we definitely saw that he could be a good advocate for LGBT businesses. Tom Tunney was still a business owner at that point, he wasn't an alderman. So Ann Sathers was an important ally. He was part of the chamber, and he was very important to the work that we were doing. And later as a alderman, I think the work of the chamber that he was part of influenced some of the work he was doing in terms of government contracts, right? Like he had his roots in being a small business owner and a member of the LGBT chamber. Our very first meeting, Carrie Barnett, Art Johnston, Kevin, and I was at Ann Sathers on Belmont, as most community meetings were in those days. So I don't know. I feel like government, our elected officials, Lamont Robinson is now an openly gay elected official, and he's also an ally to the chamber. There's an ally almost under any rock I find, right? Like I can figure out a way for people to help the work that I'm doing in almost any area, from philanthropy to government to corporations to small businesses. But probably the biggest one is corporations. I think corporations can do a much more aggressive job at supporting small businesses and communities of color, LGBT communities, through their whole network. It should not just be about where they buy their pins, right? It has to also be about where they spend their marketing dollars, and all across the board, they're spending money, and they should be doing it in a better way.
I got you. And I agree. As someone who's a part of a corporation, we do have to do more. So my final question to you before I open it up to questions from everyone that's on the fireside chat. You've told us about the start of the chamber and given us this great history and just things from your perspective as you were getting started. So let's talk about the next 25 and tell us what you would like to see as a vision for the chamber in the next 25 years.
You know, our community isn't really a community. The LGBT community is a kind of a facade. I mean, it doesn't exist. It exists when you need it, and people come in and out of it as they need it. But then when they don't need it, they go to their own things, the lyric opera or to a suburban softball game, right? Like, it's a very tenuous community. It's probably the community that's most similar to it is the disabled community. That they have all these different parts of that community, and they come together to advocate for big policy issues like the ADA, but then everybody goes their separate ways. And you often only gather out of anger and protest and policy. But as a community, the institutions are weak, and because they're not consistently utilized and supported. There's a statistic out that 95% of LGBTQ people don't support LGBT organizations in any financial way. And that's probably the case in lots of communities, right? So to me, the next 25 years is about making sure people understand the need and importance to support community institutions when you don't need them. One of the things that when I was working on the March on Springfield for Marriage Equality in 2013, I recruited 12 co-chairs across the state to do that with me. And every one of them, I said to them, I don't care about marriage. I don't, actually. My partner and I have been together 26 years. We haven't got married. The government should have it's a discrimination against single people in my mind. But if people want it, they should get it. And it was in the way. The fight for marriage equality was draining our community of money and time and resources. And we needed to get it done and gone. And what we did need to do was make sure that when it was done and gone, that we pivoted quickly. So the people that I recruited, including Kim Hunt, at the time was at Affinity Community Services, I said to them, immediately after this, I promise you, we're going to do a summit on youth homelessness. Windy City Times had just recently we'd done a series called Generation Halstead about youth homelessness on Halstead Street and racism that was happening there, horrible racism. And I said, we need to pivot immediately our community towards another topic, a big topic, before they go back into their homes and forget that they're part of this community. So within 5 months of the marriage bill passing, we had this big march on Springfield, October 22nd, 2013. The bill passed a few days later. It was a great example of inside outside activism. We immediately had a meeting after to say, what are we going to do? And we had this huge summit on youth homelessness. And for four or 5 years, I worked on that project until I took over at the Reader. Kim Hunt is still doing it. She's head of Pride Action Tank. That's what we start. Pride Action Tank was directly started out of the activism of the marriage march so that we didn't lose momentum on other issues in the community. So my concern is that our community, now that we are accepted in so many places, including our families, right? Familial homophobia is the worst thing most of us go through. And that is a lack of acceptance from the very first structure you're in, which is family. And now that more families are accepting, more corporations are accepting, all those people who might have been the builders of our community are no longer filtering into the community that way. And so that's great, right? It's the acceptance we wanted, but it also meant that we lost a lot of the warriors into that. And we lost a lot to burnout, and we certainly lost a lot to HIV/AIDS. So we have a community that is not that strong, except in moments in time. And we need to be strong 365 days a year so that people don't burn out, so that we are constantly rejuvenating and bringing in new people to the movement. And the only way we're going to do that is through intersectionality, because there are LGBT people very active on issues. This generation is the most informed generation there ever has been in this planet. They're not apathetic. They're just working on other issues. And until our LGBT community understands how Black Lives Matter is connected to us, how the disability rights movement is connected to us, how there are LGBT people out and owning businesses all throughout the city and the state, until we kind of recognize that we're not one-dimensional, we won't be as strong as we possibly could be.
Wow. that is a lot said. And I'm telling you, a great final question to ask and a great final answer to hear. Um, um, but that's just for me. We're going to open this up to asking other individuals if we have any questions out there that we would like to ask Tracy, whether it be about history, whether it be about her thoughts with regard to the challenges of today and tomorrow for LGBT businesses. Please, guys, come on with the questions.
Can I start?
Absolutely.
Tracy, thank you so much for everything you've done for the community. I think it really struck a note with me. One of the big focuses on Pride Candle Company is spending money within the community. And in having conversations with other like-minded businesses, I think it's really unfortunate how many businesses do not think about this, and consumers do not think about spending money within the community and keeping those dollars circulating within our community. I mean, those are power. And so how do we get that message across? I obviously been trying to do it for a long time, but how can we teach other members of the community that, hey, whether it's your marketing firm or your photographer or, whatever supplier you can use, by keeping those dollars in the community, they're going to be reinvested within the community.
Yeah, I mean, it is like this, like Small Business Saturday or whatever, right? That the American Express does. It might be something that needs to be underwritten by a corporate partner that really takes an advocacy and educational approach to it rather than a guilt approach. Because I think most of this is ignorance is not the word I'm really going for, but you know what I mean? It's like, they don't know. They may not know there's a Pride Candle Company. They may not know there's this gay marketing firm or gay, Olin, the great gay real estate agent, right? Like they have to, it has to be hammered, as you know, in marketing, it's like at least 7 times to get that point across. And the thing about the chamber, because it's not a geographically centered chamber and our community is stereotyped as being in 1 or 2 neighborhoods, part of the educational lift is the wide range of businesses. You're not going to just be able to get a lawyer or a counselor. You're going to be able to get almost any kind of business, right? And once you do the consumer education, the chamber also will grow its own membership because other types of businesses will want to be. And I think restaurants and retail are some of the hardest members to convince the value of. So it is a kind of a catch-22. If you're going to be able to bring more consumers to them, it's really the most expensive lift, both financially and time-wise, but worth it in the end. A lot of the consumer-based work we did is how we grew the chamber in the early years. It is a very different time than 25 years ago, in good ways too, because it's a lot cheaper to access. Your cost of getting a customer is cheaper because of the internet. So I would say that it's something that to look at as is there a consumer-facing campaign that, I saw Wintrust is on the call, that Wintrust Bank would underwrite to really embed into the organizations out there, the Howard Browns, the Chicago Houses, et cetera, of the world, as well as the consumer side and the business side. Is there something that could be done that grows that? But the other part of that is to make sure that it's many types of businesses and that there is true diversity in that. So, the African-American gay businesses, the trans Latino-owned businesses, et cetera, are part of that messaging so that we fight those stereotypes that the external world. One of the things I learned, early on is that we are such a small community in numbers. Now in Chicago, we're more than our typical percentage nationally, right? A lot of people come to Chicago from small towns. So we have a larger percentage of the population here, but we will never be the majority. And what that means is our allies, and that's what Latonya was asking about earlier, when we got the marriage equality passed, half the people that showed up in Springfield that day weren't LGBTQ. We had 5,000 people there and half of them were our allies. And if you do a consumer education campaign, a lot of our allies are going to be the ones spending the money. I tell you, I did a game called That's So Gay. I think half the people that bought that game were sisters and brothers of gay people who who gave it to him as a gift, right? So that's what's funny about this, right? I want to support Black-owned businesses, right? And so I go actively out to do that. Well, there are straight allies that want to support LGBT businesses if they knew who they were. So that needs to be part of the messaging too.
I have a question on the chat from Brandy of Silver Foxes Travel. And she asked, how and what do you think we need to first do to establish a baseline of complete unity?
Complete unity. I don't know that we're ever going to have it, but I think actions speak louder than words. I mean, so to me, the way you do that is to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to be at the table, but not feel guilty or forced to do that. So that's why we wanted to start with small businesses and not corporations, because they all have different amounts of time they have and value their time differently. So maybe there are other ways that the kind of diversity needs to be accommodated so that everybody feels like they can participate.
Okay, and then we have one more question. Oh, I think Jeremy's giving me the hook. I just want to say thank you so much, Tracy, for just your knowledge, your background, the thought process of establishing an organization like what you've established that allows me to be a member and to support and to allow that great advocacy so that we can create that economic impact for all of our LGBT, our transgender, et cetera. So we just thank you for all the hard work that you've done and all the thought and the value that you've put into advocating for this community. So we really appreciate you, and you thank you. And applause, applause, applause.
Yay, thank you.
All righty, and I'm coming off, Jeremy. I'm turning it over to you. Or maybe not.
Latonya, I'll take it from you. Thanks so much. Thanks, Latonya. Latonya and Tracy, thank you so much for that really phenomenal look back. And Tracy, your recall of those very early days. As someone who's been with the organization for as long as I have, I'm glad that some of those errors of the past are no longer with us, but certainly also very excited as we continue on this journey for the future. And thank you for sharing that vision with us as we look ahead to what the next 25 years look like, which is the perfect transition for our two major partnerships for our 25th anniversary. And that is, of course, with Time Zone One, a marketing firm that we have brought on to assist us with the new look for our logo for the chamber, but also aligning our vision as we continue to promote the chamber statewide. And so I saw, at the very least, Andrew Bell and Kristen Galbraith on the call with us today. So very excited to hear from them in just a moment. And then, of course, our longstanding LGBT business enterprise events with the K, Chris Sangari, who is assisting us with our vision for the 25th anniversary celebration that'll be coming up later on this year. So I'm gonna turn it over to Time Zone One though first to give us a look at our new logo.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. You can just hold on this slide while I do a little bit of an introduction. Thanks for the intro, Matt. I appreciate that. My name is Andrew, and Kristen Galbraith is on. She can wave really quick, just a quick introduction. She leads our global creative team. Time Zone One has an office in Chicago. That's where we're headquartered. And we also have an office in New Zealand, which is a completely different world from where we're at right now. Summer and no COVID. So love talking to them across the other side of the globe. But we have been members with the LGBT Chamber of Commerce for probably about 2 years now. And then late last fall, I was talking with Jeremy about the opportunity to work and partner more on the 25th anniversary project that you guys are celebrating this year. And so this was a really great opportunity, if you want to flip the slide, a great opportunity for us, Time Zone One, who specializes in telling stories and solving problems, and telling stories, especially like the one that we heard from Tracy a little bit earlier, is just an amazing opportunity. And so we if you want to flip the slide again, partnered with, starting in October, it's been about a 4-month kind of stint with Jeremy, as well as the other board members, to put together a new look and feel for the 25th anniversary. A little bit about sort of the process we went through. It was a kind of a combination of a deep dive into the organization, getting inputs from Jeremy and some of the board members, also looking at sort of other similar organizations, applying our lens and some of the work that we do across some of our other nonprofit clients, our travel tourism clients, and all that sort of stuff. And did a series of work sessions and sort of hands-on kind of evaluations of various different logos. And we worked really hard to come together with what is kind of the best way to demonstrate what it is that the LGBT Chamber does for the community. Not only looking at Chicago, but looking at across the state. And so I'm going to flip the slide over. It has been a journey, and you can kind of see where, obviously you guys are very familiar with where the logo has been in the past. And we looked at a way to try to evolve where you guys have been and try to bring together the excitement that the 25th anniversary has and give it some spark. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kristen a little bit, who's going to talk a little bit about where we went creatively with this and show you some of the examples.
Don't worry, only 40 more slides before we show you what it actually looks like. I love the chat anticipation building on the chat. So again, it's been quite a journey here. This is where we started, and you know, initially we were just thinking that we were going to evolve the logo, maybe just give it a little bit of a 25th anniversary treatment, but as probably many of you know, is with any project, you start to peel back the layers and really start discussing, you know, what does this logo mean? What do people like? What don't they like? We did all the work sessions Andrew was just referencing. And aesthetics aside, there was just a desire for this logo to do more for the organization, to stand out and stand for something. So we put this to our design team, again, with the assignment of let's evolve it a little bit. And I got to tell you, we had designers just raising their hand saying, I want to work on this. I want to work on this. So we had quite the team going at this because there was a lot of passion for it and excitement over just thinking about how we can help the organization, again, stand out and stand for something from a visual standpoint. There's so much that goes into all the activity and the everything that goes on, you know, behind the scenes. So when we think about this being a first impression, we really just want to kind of wow people. So if you want to click to the slide. This is kind of what I was just saying. Again, a lot went into it. Those were some of the key words we heard, and here it is. Here it is. I'll let this just kind of sit for a minute. As you can see, just right off the bat, brighter, bolder. Maybe some of you can kind of tell there's still some linkages to the original logo in terms of some of the type treatments. Jerry, if you want to click to the next slide, this is just kind of starting to break it down. Obviously, right off the bat, you can see it's a brighter base color, simpler font, even a streamlined name. The previous logo said Chamber of Commerce of Illinois. Just kind of simplified some of the words there. We bolded Illinois to, again, kind of help that stand out a little bit more. The kind of circle shapes here, there's some meaning behind this. You know, there's Chamber of Commerce, there's a little bit of an indication of a C there, but really we kind of wanted to just think about like that inclusivity and that community with the color strip on the inside that, again, starts to represent community and inclusivity. The last thing here you'll notice is we have a little bit of a 25th anniversary tagline in there, your business voice for 25 years. Wanted to just have some sort of nod to 25 years here. It's really hard to put into like 5 words what the chamber does. So again, a lot kind of went into thinking about what was the single most important thing to communicate. And it really kind of came down to that voice that the chamber does for the LGBT business community. On the next page, we start to just kind of break down again, your business voice for 25 years. The vision here is that this is a line used for the 25th anniversary. Doesn't mean it would necessarily go completely away with a clean slate after, because again, we love that idea of putting the stake in the ground of being your business voice. But we also wanted to, again, think more about what's a longer tagline. And when we started to think about all the inputs again, and how do we boil down to what the chamber does in 3 words, champion, challenge, change. And that was something that we really felt strongly about bringing to the forefront. So we actually are using both of the taglines in some of the executions. You'll just see, I see some requests for t-shirts. So the next slide, I think the next slide is a t-shirt. Again, this is just sometimes how we start to show the logo, just to see, you know, how will it appear on different pieces. And the next few pieces, once we settled on this logo, we just started to create new elements. So this look and feel and this brand will be extended throughout all elements coming through. So business cards and e-blast template. We've got an email signature. You can see here, again, just bright, colorful, it stands out, starting to use some different visual elements. You can see in here, again, we still have the 25th anniversary tagline within the logo, but we're pulling out that challenge, champion, change, and really using them to work together. And we got it. Oh, and that's it. And this is a PowerPoint template slide. So you can see, again, I think as we think about, you know, the future and the vision, you know, just giving something really bright to stand out, but again, hopefully start to associate more meaning behind it and really show what the chamber stands for. And that's everything. Hope you like it.
That's awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Kristen, so much. And so exciting to get to see all of the comments coming in through the chat. Just how thrilled everybody is with our new logo and brand. Appreciate all of your hard work with that. And I can say board work sometimes feels like slow incremental change. And so to get something like this is a very special treat for us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Also want to make a quick moment to note that Latonya represents Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, who is one of our premier partners for the 25th anniversary. Just want to make sure we do not miss that tonight. Yeah, dance it out, Latonya. And now a video about the humble beginnings of the Chicago Area Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, now your LGBT Chamber of Commerce of Illinois. So thank you to Chris and Gary from Events with a K for putting that together for us. And now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our events committee chair, Olin Ergel.
Okay, thanks, Matt.